Well, hello, crochet fans. Welcome to the Crochet Blab. Here today I have with me Satie of Yarn Obsession, and we are both self-taught crocheters. We taught ourselves from the back of a book. We have very similar stories, and it was before the days of YouTube, so there was not a lot of extra help out there. So we've worked through the trenches, and we know all the struggles, and so we're here to talk about at least 4 of our top struggles that we want to make sure we cover with you. And we had a lot of fun preparing for this, so I hope you have a really good time. Satie, why don't you tell us a little of your story about teaching yourself to crochet?
Oh, wow. Okay, let's see. I started crocheting back in, believe it was right around 2002. And my catalyst was that I was dating a guy who I subsequently married and am still married to. But he took me home to meet his grandmother for the first time. And I got to her home and she wanted to just show me around, which was great. And she started showing me around, and she was like, okay, this is a painting that I painted, and these are the paper beads that I make, and these are the quilts that I've made, and oh, look at the Afghans that I've made. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, like, you know, this woman was, I think at the time she was 77, because she's now in her 90s, but she was around 77, and I'm going, okay. And she raised 8 kids, by the way. And so I was like, if she could do all those things, I think I can do one. So my boyfriend at the time, he had just gotten like a gift card from Barnes & Noble. So I said, and he said, you can have it because I already got the book that I had wanted, and so I really don't need it. I was like, okay, let's go to Barnes & Noble and get a book on crochet, and then let's go to Michael's and get a hook and some yarn. And that's exactly what I did. And I said, and I'm making you a scarf. He's like, okay. And oh my gosh, it's a god-awful scarf. We still have it. He still wears it, and every day I cringe. I'm like, oh, but it shows you how far you've come. And it also shows a lot of the things that I did in the beginning that I didn't know I shouldn't do or how to do, that I would never in my life do now, because I know that that's going to come apart, or yeah, you might want to make your sides even, and you know, stuff like that. So that has been my crochet journey, about 13 years now. Definitely an evolution in crochet.
Wow.
What about you?
Well, my story is actually really similar to yours, because it was the same year, 2002. I was living in LA at the time, and I've always loved going to the crafty type stores. So I was in Michael's Arts and Crafts. I just wandered the aisles, you know. I've always had like
I don't know why.
Oh, was it just me?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I found myself in Michael's in Pasadena, California. I must have been bored or something. I don't really know.
Oh my gosh, Pasadena, really? We lived there.
Yeah. Oh, in 2002?
I know that, Michael's.
Okay, well, that is where it all began. So I found myself in the yarn aisle, and I loved all the colors. I stood there kind of mesmerized by all the textures and everything that was there, and I was like, Now my mom knitted when I was growing up, and I remember her trying to teach me a little bit, but it didn't really stick. And she crocheted a little too, but primarily knitted. So I really didn't pick up either one when I was a kid. So I was in Michael's, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to try one of these. And I stood before all the accessories, and I saw knitting needles and hooks and like all these things. But then I look at the price. Now I could get a whole set of crochet hooks for just a little bit more than 1 pair of knitting needles. And I thought, that's a better way to go. I have more options, and I don't know what size knitting needles to get anyway. So I went for the crochet hooks. And I was like, it doesn't look that hard. I can give this a try.
Right.
And you know,
Right.
in the aisles when they have booklets and things hanging off of the shelves in front of the yarn, I just picked up one of those that had a bunch of patterns, and it's like a little booklet, you know, and in the back it had instructions on how to crochet. I thought, okay, well, you know, I can do this. And so that's what I did. I went home and I taught myself from the back of this little pattern book, and no one was around to tell me if I was doing it right or not. And there were some things that were not right. So a couple months later, a friend of mine saw me doing it, and she corrected some of the stuff that I had taught myself to do wrong. So,
Oh,
and I
lucky
still have
you.
that first project that I turned into like an envelope cover of a cushion. So I have that in a box somewhere, and I'm thinking I really should pull that out and have that as a reminder of like how far I've come.
No, the temptation is always going to be, gosh, just take that apart and do it again, you know, because you're gonna know, you're gonna be like, I so know what I need to do now. I need to take that apart and do it again.
Yeah.
That's the temptation I have every single day. I swear that scarf is right in our closet, and I swear I look at it.
Start over.
Yes,
But
like, oh,
you also want the
I can redo that yarn. It will look fantastic.
Really? Okay, well, we have a couple people in here. Not quite sure what your names really are. But,
oh yeah, her, she picked up a book the same. I picked up a book in a pattern.
Story yeah. All right, well, how about getting to the goodies we have here? So each of us have chosen 2 struggles that we want to discuss to help out the self-taught crocheters be better. Or just give you some comfort that you are not alone, because I think we all do this. We all do this. So my first one is tension. Tension is something that is a challenge for everybody. You know, your fabric looks weird. All your stitches look different. You don't know how to hold the yarn, you know. Now, I still hold my yarn the way that it said in the back of that book. And I've just kind of, it just happened to work well for me. Since then, I've learned other ways or different ways to hold the yarn that people can choose based on how their hand really functions. So adjustments to make to do that. And when you're teaching yourself to crochet, I think it's very easy to hold the yarn so tight that it doesn't move, because you're so nervous, you're so frustrated. And you think if you're holding the yarn tighter that it'll work better. Right. And it often does the opposite, because if your yarn isn't moving, you are not making anything.
Exactly. And, yes, I remember that. I don't remember how they told me to hold the yarn, actually. I have just kind of evolved into how I hold it, and it's actually very basic. But whenever I'm teaching, if I'm teaching someone, I tell them, you can hold it any way you want to hold it, as long as you're not hurting your hand. So if your hand starts to ache like too soon into what you're doing, then you're holding it either too tight, or you're contorting too much, and you're not allowing the yarn to flow. So as long as the yarn can flow, then you should be fine. We're talking about tension on the yarn, MIT7. You know, when you first start to crochet, it's really hard to figure out what the right tension is, or to get your stitches even, because you have even tension all the way through. But it is something that actually just evolves as you get better. You just have to learn to kind of loosen up and let the yarn flow, because you're always, I do remember at first I was always trying to hold it so tight, and then it's like, but I can't get my hook through that stitch. I don't know why. It's like, oh. The
yarn's not moving. Yeah. Oh, and just to clarify what tension is, it's how tight or how loose your yarn, your stitch is. The job of your non-dominant hand, your yarn hand, is to control the tension, how tight or how loose that yarn is flowing through for your yarn to do its job. And that tension has to be adjusted when you're learning, because everything is new, and eventually you find like your sweet spot and
Right.
how the yarn flows through your hand, and you don't even have to think about it once you get it. And I think one of the reasons that people quit crochet early is the tension. It's just so frustrating, and they think maybe there's one way to hold the yarn, and if it doesn't work, it's just not for them. Or they're not sure how they can adjust their yarn hand to fix either the too tightness or too looseness of what they're doing. But
right. Yeah. Which is unfortunate, but
yeah. Switch it up. And I'll tell you, on my YouTube channel, that is the most, by far, the most watched video I have, is how to hold the yarn and hook. And I show 4 different ways to hold the yarn, and I talk about tension. And this seems to be something that is not taught very often in crochet classes. It's like, oh, let's just jump into, okay, let's make stitches. So it's like a common challenge that people have.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, when I teach, I try to jump in, but I always talk about the tension and holding the yarn. I start because you know what happens is that the first time I was going to teach a class, I went in there with all these notes about, you know, crochet, what it is, what you need, and people were just looking at me like, can we get to the project now?
Can we do something?
So bad. And so I was like, okay, I'm losing them. What do we need to do? Okay, everybody pull out your yarn and your hook, and this is what you do. You're gonna make this slip knot. This is how you make a slip knot. Put the hook in there and let's make a chain. You know, I mean, they wanted to just get in. And so I found that the best way to teach at all was just basically, as they were doing it, just give them the pointers. You know, this is how I hold my yarn. If it's not comfortable for you, then you can hold it however you hold it. I'll come and I'll look at it, and I will help you, you know, find your space. And then tension is really important. You don't want to hold it too tight. And, you know, as they're, you know, doing this chain, either that's like a little cord or that's super loose, and I'm going, yeah, we got to get those even before we can go on to the single crochet, you know. And so, you know, I always have to find a way to make sure that I let them know that, you know, how to hold and to keep the tension. So
okay, good.
So look, one of my things that I wanted to talk about was that infamous, why am I losing stitches? Why is my
Why is it a triangle?
Why does my husband's scarf go like this and then go like that? And so I find that for me, because I know that that is such a big deal, whenever I have, like on a lot of my tutorials, I actually, and especially, it depends on the stitch, but I always say, and don't forget this little last stitch over here, because if you don't use this stitch, you're gonna wonder why you lost, you know, stitches at the end, why your count is off or anything, because sometimes it's really hard to see the last stitch. Sometimes it just doesn't look like a stitch. And so I've found that if I tell my students, or if I tell people who are learning, to just make sure you count, you know, when you're first getting started, make sure that, you know, if your pattern says that you have to have 22 stitches at the end, you do the row, or you count as you go, and make sure you have 22 stitches, because if you just think you do, you know, chances are you're going to go, wait a minute, why is it wonky? Wait, I only have 20 stitches. Yeah.
Oh, something happened.
What happened? You know, that was something that I had to do as well. Like I said, that scarf, man, it tells all the little secrets that, you know, we go through as we just learning by ourselves, you know.
Is that made out of single crochet, your scarf, or double?
I think it's double. It's double crochet.
That's where I find it's more common for people to lose stitches is with the double because we use the chain 3. And when you use that chain 3 as a stitch substitute, you forget you're supposed to use the top of the chain 3 to finish off your row.
Yeah.
And there it's gone.
You know what's interesting? Yeah. But you know what's interesting is, as a self-taught crocheter, I was like, I chain 3, and I always put my first stitch in the first stitch. Usually people chain 3 and then they skip the first stitch and then they keep going, and then they use the chain as the, they put the last stitch in the top of the turning chain. I always used a stitch there. So I never used the turning chain as a stitch. So going forward, I was always confused as to why are they saying to use the turning chain? Then I always added a stitch because they say use the turning stitch. Yeah. Right? In the top of the turning stitch. I'm like, why? I already have 24.
How you're adding stitches. Yeah. Yeah. You still have some weird looking shaped fabric.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
yeah, I don't remember when I learned which way it was. But to get the straight sides, your turning chain, you use it like a stitch substitute. And well, I don't know, I think people do both ways.
Do what?
I think people do it both ways. I don't remember how I learned.
I don't use the turning chain that much. And when I do a double crochet, I also don't chain 3, I chain 2. Because I don't use it as a stitch. So, and because I don't like having that extra space at the end. So I usually just chain 2 and then use that first stitch so that I have a straight stitch that's at the end, and then everything falls evenly across, and I never use the turning chain as a stitch. So I find it actually makes my finishing look better because I don't have any big gaps at the end of my row.
Yeah.
So there's a little secret for you that I figured out.
That's true. You chain 2 instead and let the turning chain just be the turning chain sticking off the side. But have you tried the no turning chain stitches, like a no turning chain double crochet? Those types?
I just started trying to do those. And I actually like it better. Just to have that stitch, because for me, I'm just always looking for the top of the stitch. I don't like going into the top of the turning chain because not a stitch.
Yeah, I forget how long ago it was, maybe 2 years ago or so. I learned how to do one of those types of stitches. I think there's 2 kinds out there that are pretty popular. And it was like a game changer for me. That and the, what do they call it? Chainless foundation stitches.
Yeah.
Like those 2 things have like transformed the way that I crochet.
Yeah.
Because it gives such a nice finish, like a professional finish to your work. Yep. And for the no turning chain double crochet, it like I use it everywhere. And it looks so much better. So much better.
Does.
It takes some practice to really get it, but once you do, smooth sailing, you'll never go back to that turning chain unless there's like a specific reason in a pattern. But for the most part, use that instead. Great. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
So my other suggestion or point I wanted to make was actually the one thing I really struggled with when I taught myself, and that is only going through one side of the V when I was going through the stitches. There's the V at the top of every stitch, and it's very easy to just go through the front one, the one that's facing you, because it's right there. It's very easy to see. And just go through the one loop instead of going through both, which left the one that I did not use exposed on the other side. So you get like these ridges, which if a pattern wants you to use that for the texture purpose, then it'll say, but you know, standard is to go under both loops. Well, I taught myself to only go through one loop, and that was the first thing that was pointed out to me and corrected in what I was doing. So my first project has those loops, but I find that is very common as well.
Wow, I didn't realize how common that was.
Well, for my students, I just had someone last night in one of my crochet classes. It was an intermediate level class, and that's what she was doing, just going through the
front loop only.
The front loop facing her, yeah. But what that does, it stretches out that loop, and it looks really big, and it changes the look of your fabric. So,
oh yeah, it totally changes the look. There are definitely reasons to do it. Like I just did it on a pattern where I did certain stitches only in the front loop and then came around the neck and did the other stitches in the back loop. So you kind of have that flap. So when you can fold it down as a collar because it's just overlaps right here. But yeah, you don't want to do it all the time. And I didn't not.
Yeah, her does the same thing. Same. I think when you're teaching yourself and no one is there to show you, that is one of the most common things that happens because it's right there. It's very easy, and you have to be intentional to find the back loop. To work into.
Well, I could see why that would be a problem because when you're working into a chain, your first chain, you're only working into one loop. At least I am. I used to most of the time. I used to only work into one loop into the chain. And so I can see how if you're going back the other way, you're like, okay, I should just use that front loop. But now that I do work into the chain like 3 different ways, it doesn't correlate to anything else for me. I just have different things.
Okay, question.
I
also think a hard thing to understand is which side is up.
That's not dumb. No question is dumb.
Which
no
side
question is dumb.
Up? Oh, you mean in a chain?
In a chain,
right?
It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. So, do you mean in a chain?
Wait, she's calling in. Let me let her in. Then we can have a conversation about it.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm not all totally made up for the camera, but so I figured to say this in words.
It's okay.
Right? Then to try to say like, no, I mean like that. You can't type that. So I knit more than I crochet, but one of the things that challenged me when I was crocheting was, do you go through both loops or do you go through the front or the back or whatever? And so once I get going like past the chain, the base row, the foundation row, I felt like I could kind of see which way was up. But when I think, you know how in knitting they're always like, make sure you don't twist your stitches. Like it's easy for me to see if I'm twisting them when I'm knitting. Whereas when I'm crocheting, I'm kind of like, well, it's not twisted, but is this the right side up or is this up? So on your foundation row and you're doing your chain, do you get like the V on top and the one on the bottom? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
yes, you do have you have one part, one side has the V, and then the other part has like this, just the one.
Right. Okay.
Right, like this. But the thing is, with crochet, you can work into almost any one of those for the beginning chain. So, for example, you could go through these 2 top ones if you want, and then you leave the bottom one on the bottom. So it ends up like this again, but you've got your stitch in between. Or you can turn it and go through just the bottom one. So you have your V on the bottom, which then makes it easy for you to go back when you're doing your edging to find those the V to work your stitches into. Then I used to turn it like, let me see, like this, and work only through the top stitch on my on my chain. So you could actually do it three different ways. I don't know if you know any other way, Tasha, but you could work it 3 different ways. It just depends on what you're trying to do. But as long as you know which way you're working, then make sure you're keeping those in front of you. So for example, if you're working through the V, make sure you're keeping the V in front of you at all times so that you're not confused by the back spine, if you will. You know,
okay.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Can I ask one more question while I'm here?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. So I hold my hook like this. Like if this is the hook end, I hold my hook like this and I like dig. I dig and pull like this. But then I also see people hold it like this, where they're doing more of this action.
Mm-hmm.
Does it matter?
Nope.
No.
Okay.
One is fine.
Yeah, one is the knife hold, is what they call. The other one's the pencil hold. I use more of the knife hold like you do. I use it, I hold it very tightly. Some people hold it actually like a spoon. It doesn't matter. As long as you can get your tension and as long as you're not hurting your hand. Okay, that's very important. As long as you're not hurting your hand, then you can hold it however is comfortable for you.
Okay. All right, that's cool.
I do the knife hold and I've tried to do the pencil hold, but I feel like it restricts the motion of my wrist, which I tend to do a lot of. So it becomes uncomfortable for me. And I think if I were to continue using the pencil hold, I would probably hurt myself. So I stick with the knife hold where I have a lot of range of motion, which I find that I go back and forth. I twist the hook a lot, you know, when I'm making stuff. So that knife hold is perfect for me. And if that's what you know, if that's what works, then that's fine.
Then
all right, cool. Yeah. That's what I do too. I kind of push through and twist the hook and come back. So I'm doing a lot of this action with it.
Oh yeah.
Whereas with this one, I feel like I have to move my whole arm. And
no. I think you don't have to do all the acrobatics. You know, let the do your job for you.
That's funny. Totally.
Seriously, you see some people and it's like, and I'm like, what in the world's happening? But
I guess they like it like that. Great. You know, actually crochet helped me a lot because I kind of wanted to knit, right? Like that was my goal, was to knit. But I had a hard time doing it American style with the throwing. I was like, man, this like takes forever.
Continental style. I find continental so much easier with knitting as well because it's just like crochet.
Well, that's what happened. I went to crochet. I'm like, oh, well, this is way faster. Look at me do this now. And so then I found, I don't know, I think it was knittinghelp.com. I don't know if you've seen her videos. She has like gads of videos, right? And I'd gotten so used to holding my yarn on the left, right, to pull that this is way easier. And then I discovered continental knitting, woo, and my life changed. And I was like, this is so much easier. Why doesn't everybody do this?
I don't know.
It's like the metric system. Why can't we just do what everybody else does?
We have to have a different way. I don't get it. You know? Oh yeah, continental. When I knit, I use continental because I find it so much easier and it just keeps my hand in the same natural position that I have with my crochet. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm all about this. This is easy. Whereas before, you know, it was like throwing it over, you know, it's like, oh,
who's got time for that? Nobody has time for that.
Can't get anything done.
I don't have time for that.
Well,
I got kids. I gotta go.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Bye.
Oh, no. That's what I mean when I'm knitting. I'm like, I don't have time to sit here and wait for all this. I have kids. I only have like a certain amount of time.
Thanks for hopping on.
No problem. I'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, well, let's see.
So
the content.
I'm gonna do a time check because unfortunately I have to leave at 2:45 because my son has a doctor's appointment today.
Oh, so you got like 10 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, make your last point really quick then.
My last point, what was it? Oh, binding off. Oh my gosh, when I first started crocheting, that was like the worst. And that is the thing that you see on that scarf too. I was like, how do I figure out these ends? Okay, I have to cut it really close, clip. And of course, now you have this knot that's hanging off at the end of your work. And there's no way for you to make sure that it's never going to come apart. And it will come apart. And so yes, I used to do that all the time. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so bad. Now I know, okay, leave a tail, hello, you know, do your stitches over your tail or, you know, but weave it through. But when I first started, I didn't understand what do you mean weave it through? I was just like, let me just cut it off. All you gotta do is just cut it off. Because it's not gonna stay.
Fabulous. Excellent, excellent.
Oh my gosh.
As suspected, we had other things that we wanted to talk about, which were suggestions of how to go from a beginner crocheter to confident. So we're going to do another blab on Thursday at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, to cover those suggestions. So you can find that over on my profile to subscribe to the next one. And we'll be back talking about how to go from beginner to confident.
Yay!
And for finding us, Satie is at yarnobsession.com. Oh yeah. It absolutely can. You can find Satie at yarnobsession.com, and I am at Forever Bliss crochet.com, and we both have YouTube channels, so you can go check those out. Thanks for joining us. Bye.